Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Following on from the disappointment of the last video, today I am going to be getting the cam belt back onto the Volvo. Now, I have already removed this, which is the VVT pulley, and I am going to be installing this, which is a VVT delete pulley. So this does have a degree of adjustment on it, and the reason why I'm putting this on is because I can put this into the locked position of this, because the ECU that I'm running, the Speeduino, can't actually control this properly. The stock ECU can vary this to whatever degree of timing it wants the cam. The Speeduino can only do on or off. This has about 20 degrees of advance in it, and when I turn the VVT on via the Speeduino, it goes directly to 20 degrees of advance, which the engine doesn't particularly like. It does kind of run, but not ideal. So the plan is fit this on in the fully retarded position where this is locked at. I will then play around with the advance to find where the engine is most comfortable at the top end of the rev range, which was the issue with this, by the way. The car didn't seem to want to rev out, so the bottom end was really strong, spooled up the turbo great, but going on for about 4,500 RPM, it just felt like it was restricted. So the idea, advance this to where the car pulls strongest at the top end. Say this wants to be set to 8 degrees advance where the car is most happy. I will basically put a stopper on this so it will only go from 0 to plus 8 degrees. So when I turn on the VVT on the Speeduino, it goes directly to 8 degrees, and I can set the parameters for triggering it at whichever RPM I feel that it's best to cross over. So it basically turns this into an on-off type VVT. So I don't know if this can work, but I'm going to give it a go. But in the meantime, we can get this on the car. Okay, one of the first things that I've got to do is I've got to get the pulley off the end of the crank, which drives the auxiliary belt. So this will be a test for my max speeding rod sockets. To be honest, I don't think it's going to be much of a test for these, more for my little impact gun. So give it a go. Well, that was easy. Alright, so crank pulley off, old belt off. I have put a socket on the crank so I can turn the engine, and you probably won't be able to see this, but if I get this torch down here, you've got this line just here, and that corresponds to the center of that tooth there and that tooth there, which at the very end, you won't be able to see it, is there's a little tiny notch in the end of those two teeth, and they have to line up with this point here, which means that once those are in and the cams are locked in place this end, then it's good to put the belt on. But one scary thing with the VVT engines is this cam wheel, there's no keyway on it, so the only thing that is stopping this from turning on the end of this cam here is basically the torque from this one bolt, which goes in the center there. So that is the only thing that is stopping that cam wheel from spinning out. Scary stuff. And there we are, belt is on, all timed up. All I've got to do is torque this bolt up and then take off the cam tool around that side, and we are good to turn the engine over by hand first, obviously. And then what I'll do is, whilst I'm at it, I will advance the exhaust cam as far as it will go, turn the engine over by hand, make sure nothing hits, and that means that I can happily adjust it anywhere between here and there and not worry about any valve to piston contact. There we go. Didn't hit any pistons, so that's good news. What I'll do now is slacken these off, advance this cam, tighten them up, and go round a full rotation again. So, fully advanced. Whew. It's making some compression. Good news. So, I'm going to reverse that, put these back to where they were, and then put it all back together, test drive the car. It should feel exactly the same as it did before, and then I'll start playing around with the advance. Right, today's a new day. I mostly got this finished up the other night, but it's all ready to go, and hopefully this will start up. It's not been started for a little while. That's the exciting bit. There you go. Fires straight up. It's pretty good. Right, so you saw when that was running, hopefully it was shown on camera, this pulley was not round. It's kind of egg shaped and going up and down, which is not ideal. And it just so happens where I've stopped the engine, I can see here there's a crack that runs all the way through that toothed wheel. Oh, that is a pain in the arse. Right, so that little crack in there is super annoying. Obviously I can't really run the car again with this on, just in case that breaks. I mean, I'm sure it won't. I mean, it's still fairly substantial, but I don't really want to risk it. Like I say, the pulley seems to be out of round. I don't know whether it's been dropped or not, or something along those lines, but something has damaged it. And fortunately I've been able to find another one on eBay, which I have bought, and hopefully it'll be here in the next couple of days so I can get that replaced. Hopefully I don't have to take all of this out to get this changed. Hopefully if I can just take this cover off and get to the tensioner, I can take some tension off, slide the pulley out, and then put the new pulley in place. So yeah, this has actually arrived. This is the day after I discovered that. Bought this on eBay. I thought it was going to be second hand. I thought it was going to take 3 days to arrive, and it is absolutely brand new, and it arrived this morning. Even though I ordered it yesterday evening, it arrived here first thing this morning, so I'm amazed at that. And the fact that it's brand new and it only cost 23 quid, really happy with that. So that will be going on. So the next job on the list is I am going to install a return fuel line and install the fuel pressure regulator. I know a lot of you have been asking about this, so I'll document that as best I can. Yeah, there's certainly some form of restriction in there. The only way to do that, if you haven't got the proper tool, which no one ever does, is to just use a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. And it looks like I've not done mine up tightly, but yeah, normally that's fairly tight, and it does take forever to do. So I'm going to do that now. Won't bother filming it because it's boring as. So when you take this out, you're going to try not to get a load of dirt in the fuel tank, obviously. It's a little bit tricky because the fuel level sensor is part of this. So trying to do this without getting fuel everywhere is somewhat of a challenge sometimes. There you go. Obviously not great fun if you have a full interior and use the car daily, because it does make your car stink of fuel. So there you go, we'll take that out. So here we are, this is the in-tank fuel pickup pot, if you will. This is the fuel pump. It's non-standard fuel pump, this one. This is a 305 LPH uprated fuel pump, slightly larger than the Volvo 255 commonly used, but yeah, it just about fits in there if you kind of bend the strainer and basically jam it in. And this is what I was talking about. This is the pressure regulator, which is set at it's around 4.5 bar, and this is on the return line. So there is a small return line on the car, but it's at the tank end within this setup. Slightly different to the phase 1. Dare say the phase 1 is a lot easier to do this on, but I want to get rid of that restriction essentially, because if I left it in there, the return line would have a 4.5 bar restriction on it, and I wouldn't be able to use any less than 4.5 bar of fuel pressure, which is something I don't want. Quite easy to remove this. This ring here, these tabs were bent in. All I've done is used a screwdriver just to pry them out, and then this simply pulls out like so. I was in two minds of what I wanted to do. So this sits over the top here, and this is pressure out from the pump, return into here. This sits in here and drops into the pot, and I was trying to work out where it went. I want to try and keep it, as sounds silly, as standard as possible, because the return refills this pot. So basically when you've got low fuel in the tank, it doesn't matter too much because the pot is being refilled via this, so any excess fuel keeps this topped up. What I was thinking of doing was just cutting this end off, pushing that back in there, clamping that up and dropping that back in, so it kind of stays the same but without the restriction in here. So there we go, end is hacked off, and then that will just pop back in there. There we go. Then I'll just use these long nose pliers just to pull these back in so it doesn't pop out. So I just have to piece this together. This goes on there like so, and that goes there, it goes there. This piece slots back in, clips in place, then this goes in over the top, drop the hose clamp, and then pop this back together like so. One thing to note is, and it wouldn't be the first time me doing this, is the Volvo fuel pump, I believe, is a reverse polarity to most aftermarket fuel pumps. So I have to quickly remind myself which way around these go, because it wouldn't be the first time that I go ahead and pump a load of bubbles into my fuel tank. So there we go, that is back in the tank. Obviously that ring's got to go on first. I have quickly tested to make sure the polarity is the right way, which is why I've got fuel all over the place, because yes, it was right. Right, now all we got to do is collect everything up. So this is the fuel filter, like I mentioned. The fuel feed is this one, which goes directly from the pump, and then this one here, this one goes to the fuel rail, this one goes back to that 4.5 bar restriction. So what we need to do is make a pipe that goes from here directly to here without this here. So around the front, this is the fuel line which goes to the fuel rail, and there is a fuel pressure regulator here. Slightly different to a normal fuel pressure regulator. This actually allows pressure in front of it rather than behind it. So this has got a vacuum line which goes to it, which takes a signal, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every 1 psi boost pressure that you get, it adds an extra psi of fuel pressure. So the reason why we have to replace this setup is because this line, like I mentioned earlier, is fed with 4.5 bar of fuel pressure. That means that when you get to 1.5 bar of boost pressure, you then cannot add any more pressure to the fuel rail. The base fuel pressure is 3 bar, so if you then went 1 bar of boost, you've got 4 bar in the fuel rail. 1.5 bar of boost, you've got 4.5 bar of fuel pressure. Any more than 1.5 bar of boost, you then have a lack of fuel supply, because you are requesting more pressure from the fuel pressure regulator, but the supply is capped to 4.5 bar. So that's why there is a limit to the standard fuel delivery system on these engines. So if you're wondering why this had to be replaced, then that's the reason why. So this is a standard fuel rail, and this here was a standard fuel rail. So what I've done is I've basically welded some AN6 fittings to either end, like so. So one will be the supply end, and the other end will go to the fuel pressure regulator. And the way that normal fuel pressure regulators work is basically like putting your thumb on the end of a hose. So the fuel pump will deliver fuel pressure via the hose, and your thumb, acting like the fuel pressure regulator, will stem the flow and build fuel pressure in the hose behind it, or in the fuel line and the fuel rail. What then comes out beyond your thumb, or the fuel pressure regulator in this case, is the excess fuel, which then goes back to the fuel tank. So it loops round in a system, and the fuel rail will have the pressure that is requested by the fuel pressure regulator. So I hope that clears that up. I'm not the best at explaining things, but that is that's the basics really. So what I've got to do is take this fuel rail off, get this fuel rail on, get the fuel pressure regulator mounted somewhere, and then run the lines, and that should be it. It's a fairly easy job. So that comes off like that. If you've already got some fuel pressure in the rail, there's a press the valve like you have on your mountain bike, which can release the fuel pressure there. Mine hasn't, obviously, because I've taken the fuel system apart and it's all pissed out on the driveway. And then this just lifts out like so. This end has a quick release fitting on it. I've never felt that being the most secure way of fitting a fuel line, using these two little barbs here. So then to remove the injectors, it's just a T25 Torx. That then slides off, and then your injectors you just tease out. So depending on how long your injectors have been in there, probably a long time, they may be a little stuck, and the O-rings may not be in the best condition. They may tear as you pull them out. These have not been in here very long, so they slide out nice and easily. So push them in like so. It's a good idea to give them a little bit of lubrication, and there we have it, fuel rail ready to go on. And that's fuel rail on. So I'm going to fit the regulator here, so I need to get a line going from the end of the fuel rail to the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator, and here's one I made earlier. So simple enough, that threads onto the end of the fuel rail, under over, and thread to the bottom there. Now this line here will be the return line going to the tank, so I've got to make that up, and I'll be using this length here, and I've also got to make a line going from the metal fuel pipe underneath the car to the end of the rail. So I'm going to remove this, There you have it. Going to quickly make up this fuel line and cut this to length and send it to the tank. Okay, so fuel rail is in, just doing the return line here. I've tucked this down here, routed it where I want it to go. That goes underneath the car here. It will get fixed to the existing fuel rail underneath there, well out of the way. Goes to the tank and then comes out here by the tank. It will come out on this side. I've marked where I want to cut it. I've left it slightly long for the minute so I can come back and make any further cuts later on, but I need this part for the fuel feed, so I'm going to cut it now and then put it all back in. And there we go, install is complete. So this is the feed line, it goes down to the metal line down there, feeds the rail, obviously injectors, comes out of here, goes into the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator, and then comes out here and goes underneath the car, which is all tucked away. There's quite a few cable ties holding that on. It's all nice and tight underneath the car. It's not likely to get snagged on anything. Okay, so when we come in here, I'm actually going to be reusing this fitting, which is not a problem. It's a low pressure return, so it won't be under any sort of strain. The reason for that, even though I do have one of these fittings for it, is that when this goes on, it doesn't actually lock, so I can pull that off. Reason being is this ring here is too close to this kind of bulkhead part, so it actually bottoms out on the bulkhead before it gets to the barb that sits in there. So this one here will just slide on and clip into place. There you go, done. So here we are, this is the final hose which is going underneath the car here. These are those quick connectors I was talking about. So that adapts a quick connector to a AN6, so I can use those fittings. So the plan with this is this end comes up here, slides the existing line and just clips into place. And this end here simply pushes on and clips into place, and that's it, done. And this can now get tucked up and fixed back to the side of the tank, and everything back here is now done. So there we go, everything is in and tight and in place. The feed line is in, that feeds the rail, goes to the fuel pressure regulator, and then this line returns back to the tank. You may notice that I've got the fittings on in a slightly different orientation, and the lesson of this story is to not assume you know which way to plumb your regulator. The way that I've had one in the past is the feed goes into here, the high pressure goes into here, and the return comes out the side. Turns out this one's different, which means that I've had to change this fitting because it did go to the bottom here, and then I've had to change this fitting because it came out the side of here. So I suppose the next thing to do is to give it a go. And there we go, we've got fuel pressure. The problem is that's too much, and if I try and slacken off this as slack as it'll go, you'll find it already is as slack as it'll go, and it's not going down, and I need that to be at 43 psi, so I can increase the fuel pressure, no problem, but that's not what we want. We want 3 bar at idle with the vacuum removed. Right, so I think we're on to a winner here. This is the spring that came out the fuel pressure regulator, and it sits within this housing here. And what I've actually done is I have taken apart this fuel pressure regulator, which was for the Audi, and it was a lot shorter. I found when I undid these bolts there was a lot of preload on here, so with this wound all the way out there was loads of preload already set. So I've just put the new spring in there and I've snug this down a little bit, so I'll quickly test it. And what do you know, that is absolutely bang on 43 psi, which will hopefully make the car run. So we'll try that and we'll give it a quick go. Let's go have a quick look. Yeah, running sweet now. Well, that's pretty much it for this video, just in time for the rain, as you can see. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you've got any questions, drop them down in the comments and I will try and answer the best that I can. And I will see you in the next one.